अस्सलाम वालेकुम साथियों, उम्मीद है कि आप सब सही होंगे। आज है 13 फरवरी, मंगल की शाम पाकिस्तान में। और लग रहा है कि कुछ मैं स्टेबिलिटी तो नहीं कह सकते ऐसे, क्योंकि अभी बहुत पैनिक और अनसर्टेनिटी मौजूद है। लेकिन केपीके के अंदर इमरान खान साहब की जमात ने, पाकिस्तान तहरीक इंसाफ ने, जिसके उम्मीदवार जो आजाद खड़े हुए थे केपीके के अंदर, उन्होंने अली अमीन गंदापुर, एक बहुत कंट्रोवर्शियल फिगर, मशहूर जमाना हनी बॉटल यानी शहद की बोतल के एक जमाने में एक बड़ी एग्रेसिव किस्म के कैरेक्टर ये समझे जाते हैं। और इसका मतलब है कि कोई भी बैक डाउन करने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। एक केपीके के अंदर पीटीआई की हुकूमत फॉर्म हो रही है। पंजाब के अंदर अभी भी अनसर्टेनिटी है, किसी को नहीं पता कि कौन वहां पे कोलिशन या वहां पे हुकूमत फॉर्म कर सकता है। और यही सूरत हाल चल रही है नेशनल असेंबली लेवल के ऊपर। डोमेस्टिक प्रेशर भी बहुत तेजी से यानी बढ़ रहा है। माशी सूरत हाल भी एक, आप अगर स्टॉक मार्केट को देखें कराची की, तो उसमें मंदी जारी रही। इसी तरीके से एक एक अनसर्टनिटी और एक गहमा गहमी सी फैली हुई है। मगर इस पूरे इशू के ऊपर एंड मच मोर बात करने के लिए हमारे साथ एक स्पेशल गेस्ट मौजूद हैं आज, अमार राशिद। ये एक पब्लिक पॉलिसी रिसर्चर और एक पॉलिटिकल वर्कर हैं और एक बहुत ही सिग्निफिकेंट आवाज हैं सोशल मीडिया पे, ट्विटर यानी फॉर्मली ट्विटर और एक्स के ऊपर। अमार, थैंक यू सो मच हमें ज्वाइन करने के लिए।
Thank you so much for having me, Ali.
अमार, फॉर व्यूअर्स दैट माइट नॉट नो यू, आप हमें अपने बारे में थोड़ा बताएंगे कि आप, आपकी पोजीशंस बड़ी ही प्रिंसिपल्ड रही हैं, मगर आप एक क्रिटिक भी थे पाकिस्तान तहरीक इंसाफ के। मगर पिछले एक साल से आप एटलीस्ट ऑन सोशल मीडिया एक, मैं हमायती तो नहीं कहूंगा, मगर जो उनके खिलाफ तशद्दुद हुआ, जो उनके खिलाफ फैशिज्म एक तरीके से अनलीश किया गया एक पॉलिटिकल ग्रुप के खिलाफ, आपने एक बहुत ही एक मुनसिफ स्टैंड लिया उसके ऊपर। तो अपनी कहानी बताइएगा कि आप किस तरीके से इन्वॉल्व हुए इस पूरे प्रोसेस के अंदर और पब्लिक पॉलिसी रिसर्च के अंदर।
हाँ जी, थैंक यू। मेरा नाम अम्मार रशीद है। जैसे आपने कहा, मैं तकरीबन पिछले कोई 15 साल से एक सियासत के अंदर इन्वॉल्व हूँ फ्रॉम द लेफ्ट। मेरा ताल्लुक तंजीमी तौर पे अवामी वर्कर्स पार्टी के साथ है, जिनके साथ मैं पिछले तकरीबन 10 साल से इस्लामाबाद, पिंडी और पंजाब के इलाकों में हम मुख्तलिफ मजदूर हकूक़ के लिए, कच्ची आबादियों के हकूक़ के लिए, औरतों के हकूक़ के लिए, के लिए, तलबा यूनियंस की बहाली के लिए और मुख्तलिफ तहरीकों के साथ काम मैं करता रहा हूँ। अवामी वर्कर्स पार्टी के साथ मैं 2018 में मैंने इलेक्शन भी लड़ा था इस्लामाबाद से, जिस हल्के से इमरान खान साहब खड़े हुए थे और जीते थे। और उसके बाद भी
उनके खिलाफ खड़े हुए थे आप, उनके
हाँ जी,
उनके
बिल्कुल,
खिलाफ खड़े हुए थे आप।
उनके खिलाफ खड़े होते हैं। कोई ऐसा इंटेंशनली नहीं, जस्ट हैपन टू बी कंटेस्टिंग फ्रॉम द सेम हल्का जिससे मैं कंटेस्ट कर रहा था। लेकिन बहरहाल उस दौरान हमने कैंपेनिंग की। उस वक़्त भी हमें खदशात थे इलेक्शन के बारे में, नॉट लाइक स्पेसिफिकली फॉर आवर सीट, बट इन जनरल 2018 में भी जब लोगों ने उठाए थे सवालात रिंग के ऊपर, तो हमने उनके ऊपर भी आवाज़ उठाई थी। और 2018 से 22 तक खान साहब की हुकूमत के दौरान जितनी भी उनकी, हमारा यही स्टांस था कि जो अच्छे काम करेंगे वी विल सपोर्ट इट, बट जहाँ-जहाँ वो गलत कुछ करेंगे, और ख़ासकर क्योंकि उस वक़्त जो एक निज़ाम था उसको हाइब्रिड निज़ाम कहा जाता था कि ऑब्वियसली जनरल बाजवा के साथ मिल के वो सिस्टम चलाया जा रहा था। तो उसके खिलाफ हमने भरपूर एहतजाज भी उस वक़्त किया, मुख्तलिफ औकात पे, मुख्तलिफ सवालात पे, चाहे वो कच्ची आबादियों के लिए हो, चाहे वो तालीमी निसाब के अंदर जो तब्दीलियाँ पीटीआई की हुकूमत ला रही थी उसके ऊपर हो, चाहे जो उस दौरान पश्तून तहफ़्फ़ुज़ मूवमेंट के खिलाफ रिप्रेशन हो रही थी। उसी सिलसिले में मुझे गिरफ़्तार भी किया गया था पीटीआई की हुकूमत के दौरान जनवरी 2020 में, और मेरे ऊपर सेडिशन के और एंटी टेररिज्म के का केस भी हुआ था। मुझे जेल भी भेजा गया था और उनको
2000
फिर
कब की बात है आप बता रहे हैं, कब की बात बता रहे
जैन
हैं, दोस्त
दिस इज़
रिपीट कीजिए।
जनवरी टू फरवरी 2020। और वो हमने
जस्ट
इवेंचुअली
बिफोर द पेंडेमिक, यानी पेंडेमिक से बिल्कुल पहले।
बिल्कुल, हाँ जी। तो उस दौरान मैं और हमारे बहुत से और साथी हमारी पार्टी के उनको उनके ऊपर इल्ज़ामात लगे थे। इवेंचुअली हमने कोर्ट्स के ज़रिए उन इल्ज़ामात को फ़ाइट किया। और उसके बाद भी कोविड के दौरान भी,
और
उसके बाद भी
इल्जामात क्या थे कि आप पख्तून
इल्ज़ामात
तहफ़्फ़ुज़
हमारे ऊपर से
वोट कर रहे हैं।
मेरे ऊपर जो लगे थे वो सेडिशन के थे और एंटी और टेररिज्म अंडर एटीसी के ऊपर लगे थे। जो हमने किया था, वी जस्ट अटेंडेड, हमने एक पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट अटेंड किया था, जिसके ऊपर ना तो कोई तशद्दुद हुआ था ना कुछ। लेकिन उस वक़्त जो है ज़ाहिर है पीटीआई की हुकूमत खड़ी थी साथ फौज के, जो उनके इंटीरियर मिनिस्टर थे उस वक्त ब्रिगेडियर एजाज शाह, उन्होंने हमारे इंचार्जेस को डिफेंड भी किया था ऑन टीवी। अलबत्ता खैर वो तो दैट्स एन ओल्ड थिंग। तो जहाँ तक बात है पीटीआई की हुकूमत की दौरे हुकूमत की, तो उस दौरान तो हमने उनकी मुखालफत की, जो हमें लग रहा था कि वो काम
नहीं मगर
गलत कर
अमार,
रहे।
इट्स नॉट रियली एन ओल्ड थिंग, इट्स नॉट रियली एन ओल्ड थिंग। उनकी हुकूमत के दौरान आपके ऊपर एक तरीके से आपकी राइट्स इन्फ्रिंज हुई, आपके ऊपर ये बड़े सीरियस इल्जामात लगाए गए। सेडिशन का इल्जाम भाई कोई मामूली इल्जाम नहीं है।
नहीं,
यानी कुछ
एब्सोल्युटली।
तरीके से तो जब ये इमरान खान साहब के ऊपर यानी एक तरीके से टेबल्स टर्न हुए, या जो पलटा जो है वो दूसरी तरफ भारी हुआ, तो आपको दिल में खुशी नहीं हुई कि यार देखो तुमने हमारे साथ ज्यादती की, अब तुम्हारे साथ भी ज्यादती हो रही है?
सो आई रिमेंबर लाइक जब उस वक्त वो अपना कॉन्फ्रेंस की तरफ जा रहा था, तो देयर वाज अ लॉट ऑफ डिबेट ऑन दिस ऑन द लेफ्ट, और कुछ लोग इसके हक में थे कि होना चाहिए कि ये जो पिछला हाइब्रिड निज़ाम है इसके खिलाफ इसको निकालने की ज़रूरत है। लेकिन हमें से बहुत लोग उस वक्त भी स्केप्टिकल थे, और हम कह रहे थे कि बुनियादी तौर पे तो कुछ बदलेगा नहीं, बस वही जमातें दूसरी साइड पे जाकर बैठ जाएंगी, और एक नया हाइब्रिड जो है रजीम इन पावर आ जाएगा। तो और उस दौरान फिर खासकर वो साइफर का भी मामला था। आई ऑल्सो रिमेंबर उस वक्त ऑल्सो थिंकिंग, आई वाज स्केप्टिकल कि क्या ये हकीकत हो सकती है, लेकिन आई ऑल्सो डिडंट हैव एनी एविडेंस टू द कॉन्ट्ररी। और हमें पाकिस्तानी यूएस हिस्ट्री में तो ज़ाहिर है एक पूरी तारीख है कि किस तरह यूएस ने गवर्नमेंट्स के अंदर इंटरफेयर किया है, टॉपल किया है। तो पर्सनली आई नेवर रियली टुक अ स्ट्रॉन्ग पोजिशन ऑन दैट एट दैट टाइम, बट एज इवेंट्स अनफोल्डेड आफ्टर दैट, आई मीन it became very clear, at least to me, months after, a few weeks to months after the PDM government came in, that this was not just more of the same, कि essentially वही जो अथॉरिटेरियन स्ट्रक्चर, रियासत का इकोनॉमिक स्ट्रक्चर्स को बरकरार रखते हुए निज़ाम चलाया जा रहा है, बल्कि इन मैनी वेज इट स्टार्टेड गेटिंग वर्स। एंड आई थिंक उसको
कि जो
देखते
आपके
हुए
साथ हुआ था उससे, आपके साथ जो हुआ था या आपके जो साथियों के साथ हुआ था उससे बद से बदतर होती गई सिचुएशन, आपने ये महसूस किया?
yes, that is my assessment, and I mean I'm sure there's certain people who might disagree with this, लेकिन as someone जो एक सियासी कारकुन तौर पे काम करता रहा है इस मुल्क में काफ़ी सालों से, और ये देखें ये मसले तो हमेशा से रहे हैं। there's always हमने लेफ्ट के अंदर भी constantly experience and ongoing रियासी जबर के हवाले से बहुत सारी, हमारे पार्टी की एक लीडर बाबा जान 10 साल गिलगित बल्तिस्तान में जेल में रहे थे। हमारे मुख्तलिफ पंजाब से भी और सिंध से भी कारकुनान को जबरी तौर पे लापता किया गया है पिछले सालों में। अभी लेकिन उसके बावजूद देखें, सवाल तो ये ज़ाहिर है वो चीज़ें जो हुई थी उन पीटीआई के दौर में भी और उससे पिछली हुकूमतों के दौर में भी वो बिल्कुल गलत थी, उनका एहतसाब होना चाहिए। लेकिन जो हमें अप्रैल 2002 के बाद जो नज़र आया है, वो ये नहीं नज़र आया कि वो जो इदारे जो ये सारे काम कर रहे थे, जो एक्चुअली सियासी जबर जो इस पूरे निज़ाम को चलाते हैं और बरकरार रखते हैं, और जिसके अंदर मुख्तलिफ सियासतदान भी शामिल हैं और ज़ाहिर है हमारे सरकारी इदारे, सिक्योरिटी के इदारे भी शामिल हैं, उस निज़ाम को कमज़ोर नहीं किया गया अप्रैल 2022 के बाद, बल्कि और मजबूत किया गया। और आई थिंक उसके सख्ती में आने की वजह ये थी कि पीटीआई ने क्योंकि कुछ रेजिस्टेंस की, उस वक्त से 2002 से ऑनवर्ड्स मुख्तलिफ औकात के ऊपर उन्होंने क्योंकि उनके पास नंबर्स इतने थे, उनके पास किसी उस वक्त तो पॉपुलर स्पोर्ट थी, अब तो और भी ज़्यादा हो गई है, लेकिन उस वक्त भी थी। एंड आई थिंक द फैक्ट कि इस तरह की मेन स्ट्रीम पार्टी जो कि रिलेटिवली ऑर्गेनाइज्ड है, रिलेटिवली मोबिलाइज्ड है, उसके ऊपर जब वो स्टेट रिप्रेशन आई और उनकी आवाज़ें जब बंद करने की कोशिश की, तो उनकी रेजिस्टेंस ने मज़ीद आई थिंक और ज़्यादा जो स्पेस थी कम मज़ीद उससे होगी, क्योंकि और ज़्यादा रियासत की तरफ से आया रद्द-ए-अमल। तो पिछले हाँ, तो फॉर मी ऑब्वियसली दिस इज़ एक ये बुनियादी मसला है इस निज़ाम का, जो हम तो इसको इसी तरह सब देखते आ रहे हैं पिछले जब से मैं सियासत में आया और हमसे पहले भी आने वाले जो तरक्की पसंद कारकुनान है, कि ये इस पूरे एक निज़ाम का मसला है जिसके अंदर एक रियासत है, एक पोस्ट कॉलोनियल रियासत है। उसने हमेशा से जमहूरियत को दफनाने की कोशिश की है, हमेशा से सियासी क़ुव्वतों के लिए जगह कम करने की कोशिश की है, और कभी कोई एक वज़ीर-ए-आज़म होता है, कभी दूसरा वज़ीर-ए-आज़म होता है। हम खान साहब की हुकूमत के दौरान भी कहते थे कि ये इवेंचुअली आपके साथ भी होगा, एंड दैट्स एक्ज़ैक्टली व्हाट हैपेंड। लेकिन जब वो होता है, तो आई थिंक उस वक़्त फिर आप ये नहीं कह सकते कि आपको बस अपने गुनाहों की सज़ा मिल रही है, और बस कि आई थिंक देयर इज़ दिस कांस्टेंट रेटरिक ऑफ प्रोजेक्ट इमरान को
Like
ख़त्म
you
किया जा
deserved
रहा है।
it. You deserved it.
दिस इज़ कारमा, और बस वो प्रोजेक्ट ख़त्म करना सबसे अहम चीज़ है कि प्रोजेक्ट इमरान ख़त्म हो। I do think that this is, yeah, I don't agree with this at all. I think, and what I've noticed over time also, जो कि शायद किसी वक्त मेरे अंदर भी थी, that there is also a certain sense of एक तो चले सियासी जमातें नून लीग पीपल्स पार्टी और उनके अपने मफादात हैं, वो उनको प्रोटेक्ट करेंगे, लेकिन आई थिंक एक पर्टिकुलर लिबरल लेफ्ट हल्कों में एक आई डू फील देयर इज अ सर्टेन लेवल ऑफ इमरान खान डिरेंजमेंट सिंड्रोम, कि इमरान खान की अपनी पर्सनालिटी के साथ जो लोगों को इश्यूज हैं, they just let them consume and overwhelm their entire politics, and I think ये गलती है,
नहीं, ये तो
क्योंकि
बड़ा इंपॉर्टेंट यार, यही तो सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट पॉइंट है मेरे ख्याल से यहाँ पे अमार, व्हिच मेक्स यू डिफरेंट। आई थिंक जो द रीजन हम बात कर रहे हैं कि आपके साथ ये सब चीजें हुई और आपने दो तीन अल्फाज यूज किए जो हमारे व्यूअर्स के लिए शायद एक एजुकेशन यानी टीचिंग मोमेंट हो। एक तो आपने यूज किया लेफ्ट, पाकिस्तानी लेफ्ट आपने यूज किया, दूसरा आपने यूज किया तरक्की पसंद, राइट, व्हिच मींस प्रोग्रेसिव। तो लेफ्ट और प्रोग्रेसिव की जो पिछले 1.5 साल के अंदर, यानी मैं अपने आप को एक सेंट्रिस्ट लिबर्टेरियन किस्म का बंदा समझता हूं कि मैं अथॉरिटी को एज सच लिमिटेड अथॉरिटी में बिलीव रखता हूं। फॉर एग्जांपल, तो ये जब हम आज के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में लेफ्ट की बात करते हैं, जैसे मुस्तफा सोलांगी साहब भी लेफ्ट है फॉर एग्जाम्पल, मगर वो तो फैशिज्म इनेबलर भी है साथ साथ, भुट्टो इस लेफ्टिस्ट, इनके क्या मायने क्या है भाई? एंड इट डजंट रियली मीन एनीथिंग, यानी जो चीज है वो है, हकाइक है या नहीं है। जबर इधर भी गलत है, उधर भी गलत है, जबर जबर है, और पावर इज पावर जैसे कुछ कमेंटेटर्स कहते हैं। तो इसका हमें बताएं, व्हाट डू दीस टर्म्स मीन?
आई मीन, जहाँ तक लेफ्ट का ताल्लुक है, मैं अपने एक्सपीरियंस से तो ज़ाहिर है बताऊंगा कि चाहे पाकिस्तान में हो, ग्लोबली हो, लेफ्ट की क़ुव्वतें वो होती हैं जो इंसानी बराबरी पर यकीन रखती हैं, जो चाहती हैं कि एक ऐसा समाज बने जिसमें वसाइल की मुनसिफाना तकसीम हो, कि जहाँ पे ऐसी रियासतें हों जो कि आज़ाद हों साम्राज्य से, जो अपने लोगों की ज़रूरियात पूरी कर सकें, जो एक तरक्की की तरफ जा सकें। और मैं लेफ्ट को एक इर्तिकाई क़ुव्वत समझता हूँ, कि जो माशरे को आगे की तरफ लेकर जाती है, ना कि एक रिएक्शनरी क़ुव्वत जो माशरे को पीछे की तरफ रखने की कोशिश करे। तो मेरे लिए तो ये वैल्यूज़ हैं, और मेरे लिए इन वैल्यूज़ के लिए बहुत ज़रूरी है कि जो आपके माशरे में सबसे बड़ी जो जबरी क़ुव्वतें हैं, जो कि लोगों की आवाज़ को दबाते हैं, जो कि जमहूरियत के लिए स्पेस को दबाते हैं, जो कि सिविल राइट्स को कुचलते हैं, सबसे पहले हमें उनके हवाले से कुछ करने की ज़रूरत है, उनकी स्पेस कम करने की। और जो आपने तो उसके बाद आई थिंक जो हमारे बाकी सवालात हैं, फॉर इंस्टेंस जो हम बात करते हैं कि जो हम तबकाती सवाल भी जो उठाते हैं, कि तमाम तर जमातों के अंदर बहुत सारे दौलत वाले, लैंडेड, फ्यूडल, ट्रेडर्स, मुख्तलिफ और तबकात शामिल हैं, और उसकी भी ज़रूरत है कि उसके अंदर कोई तब्दीली आए। जो दौलत और ताकत की बुनियाद पर सियासत होती है वो ख़त्म होनी चाहिए, और मज़हब की बुनियाद के ऊपर जो इस्तेसाल होता है वो ख़त्म होना चाहिए। तो ये मेरे लिए सारी यही वैल्यूज़ हैं। लेकिन बुनियादी तौर पे ये तभी मुमकिन होगा कि हम इस तरह के इर्तिकाई अमल की तरफ जाएँ, अगर कुछ बुनियादी तकाज़े तो पाकिस्तान में पूरे हों, अगर कोई सियासी अमल को चलने तो दिया जाए, अगर सियासत के लिए एक स्पेस हो जहाँ पे एक्चुअली नज़रियाती बुनियाद पे और बुनियाद पे लोग फ्रीली डिबेट कर सकें और वोट कर सकें। और मेरे नज़दीक आई एग्री कि आई हैव मेनी डिसएग्रीमेंट्स विद मेनी ऑन द लिबरल लेफ्ट, पर्टिकुलरली आई थिंक लिबरल्स ज़्यादा आई थिंक लेफ्ट में बहुत सारे लोग हैं जिन्होंने स्टांसेस लिए हैं। आई थिंक अमार जान ने भी लिए हैं, आसिम सज्जाद जैसे लोगों ने भी लिए हैं, मुख्तलिफ
यार मगर
अवकात पे।
बात सुनो, सही है, आई नो, मैं थोड़ा जरा आई डाइग्रेस हियर। सही है, स्टांसेस लिए, बहुत सारे लोगों ने लिए, मगर अपना मिडिल ऑफ द रोड जैसा आपने कहा, ये एंटी इमरानिज्म ने
या
लोगों को इतना
No,
कंज्यूम
I
भी
agree with
किया
that.
इस
I
पूरे
agree with
प्रोसेस में।
that.
मैं नहीं कह रहा कि इमरान
Yes,
खान
and
फरिश्ता था या
I think
उसके,
that's where a lot of people lost their way. And I think, yeah, I think this idea that Imran is the principal contradiction in Pakistan, this was assumed by a lot of people on the liberal left, and I think this was a massive mistake. And I think because it's not. That's simply not what it is. Imran Khan is someone whose politics has been influential in Pakistan for about the last decade or so. पिछली पूरी 75-80 साल की जो हमारी तारीख है, उसके अंदर एक ही बुनियादी आई थिंक जो पाकिस्तान में कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन है, जो हमें सेपरेट करती है विद द रेस्ट ऑफ साउथ एशिया, विद द रेस्ट ऑफ मोस्ट ऑफ एशिया एक्चुअली, जो जिन ममालिक में जमहूरियत कुछ चल पाई है, वो यही मेन सेपरेटिंग फैक्टर है, जो हमारा सिविल मिलिट्री डिवाइड है, जिसकी वजह से और सवालात पाकिस्तान में, चाहे वो तबकाती सवाल हों, चाहे वो जमहूरी सवाल हों, चाहे वो सिनफी और औरतों की आज़ादी का सवाल हो, कौमों की बराबरी का सवाल हो, वो सवालात उभर नहीं पाते क्योंकि ये इस बुनियादी सवाल को हम हल नहीं कर सकते। एंड आई थिंक जहाँ जो वही बात है कि I agree that there is this obsession, I think, with Imran and the PTI. And look, I share a lot of the critiques, खासकर 2018 से 22 तक, कि जिस तरह उन्होंने गवर्न किया, जिस तरह के लोगों के साथ किया। I think PTI supporters should also have to admit कि the people that you gave such important leadership positions to in your party, such as Jahangir Tareen, such as Aleem Khan, people who stabbed इमरान खान that the first chance that the going got rough, फयाज चौहान जैसे लोग हैं, बुज़ार जैसे लोग हैं, like परवेज खटक, महमूद खान. I mean, you can name so many of these electables that were always in it just for their own interests. But we were made to believe that this was part of the change. So I agree with those critiques, absolutely. And I think that needs to change, and it is changing, I feel, a little bit, at least in parts. But I think there's the Imran Khan derangement syndrome is real. I think it's similar to, say, Trump derangement syndrome in the US. वहाँ भी जो है डेमोक्रेटिक पार्टी जब से इन पावर आई है, तो उन्होंने भी बहुत सारे, मेरी राय में तो, गैर जमहूरी हरबे इस्तेमाल किए हैं in the US's context to try to essentially take down a member of their political opposition. And I think, I mean, but that's a separate debate. But I feel like there's a similar sense here.
No, it's connected.
And
I think it's connected. I think
Yeah,
ये
yeah.
debate's connected है, क्योंकि आप जब हमने लेफ्ट की बात की, प्रोग्रेसिव की बात की, तो अमेरिका के अंदर भी लेफ्ट ही बैठा हुआ है ना अभी. डेमोक्रेट्स आर सेंटर, और एटलीस्ट ऑन द फेस ऑफ इट, नियो लिबरल,
Yeah.
उबर
Yeah, I mean,
लिबरल,
I
मगर
wouldn't call them the
उनकी
left,
जो
obviously,
हरकतें
but
हैं,
yeah, it's a liberal establishment जो कि in power है in the US at the moment, absolutely. And I think, yeah, I think something similar happened in Pakistan, where a lot of people who maybe you could call them the liberal elite here, liberal establishment, and progressives, many of them, I think they lost sight of like what the really important issues that we had been struggling on were. And honestly, I'm just realizing, last night I realized, and that apparently right after the election, the Fairs Festival was going on, for instance. And I think this is a really good example. Like, there was a 2-day festival that had started a day after the election, which is supposed to be held in the name of Fairs, who was a revolutionary poet who, he stood against the
रावलपिंडी
powers.
म्यूटनी के अंदर, रावलपिंडी कंस्पिरेसी में इन्वॉल्व थे.
Obviously, his entire history, he was like it was a political life that he lived. And I looked at the schedule. First of all, I didn't even know it was happening, because right after the election, why are we having a festival when there's this massive rigging exercise going on? And then I looked through the sessions, and there was not a single session discussing either the election or the political crisis happening in the country right now, or the economic crisis. There was nothing on that. And I mean, I think that's just frankly a stain on the legacy of Fairs, that there's this incredibly critical event happening in your country, and people have come out in massive numbers to speak out against the status quo, against the establishment, to register their protest, and you're not even discussing what's going on.
Wow.
I mean, so I think there's a
Wow.
certain disconnection there. जिसके
Or
बारे में
hear
I
no
think
evil, speak no evil. If you don't hear it, के हो ही नहीं रहा है basically. हकीकत से
yeah,
यानी ऑस्ट्रिच बन के अंदर अपना सर घुसा दो, या म्यूटेट कर दो,
absolutely.
उस आइडिया को म्यूटेट कर दो, या तो.
Yeah, and I think it's just completely reneging on your values, essentially. Whether it's just a commitment to like political change, whether it's a commitment to democracy, whether it's a commitment to civil rights, a commitment to human rights. And I don't think we've seen that. And I mean, maybe I'll get cancelled for this. I've already said this many times also. That I do think there's some serious reflection needed by people on the liberal left about why so many of them are so disconnected from what's happening with society. And I feel like, yeah, I think there are ideological reasons for this. I think many people on progressives have this tendency of sort of like wanting to distinguish themselves from what's happening in the rest of society, and wanting to make sure that they plant their flag, and it's like separately from where others are standing. I mean, I wouldn't say this is true for all people. I think there are still people who are very committed to and stay principled regardless of who's in power. But I think this is definitely a tendency of not being able to read the room, understand what's going on in society, and support whatever broader process that exists, even if it's not happening in the exact shape or with the exact ideological framework that you prefer. I think there's certainly things where we have to go out of our comfort zone if we want the kind of change that we want to see in this country, which is like a robust pro-people democracy where people's needs are met, and people actually have a say in how the country is run. And yeah.
इस मौजू को, इस चीज को एक बुनियाद बना के अगली तरफ बढ़ते हैं, आगे की तरफ बढ़ते हैं. 8 और 9 फरवरी को जो हुआ, इलेक्शन हुआ, उसके बाद जो प्रोसेस हुआ और जो अभी तक चल रहा है, क्योंकि अभी तक एक अनसर्टेनिटी, एक धुंध मौजूद है इस पूरी धांधले के ऊपर भी। यानी एक तरफ आपके कोर्ट्स कह रहे हैं कि नहीं, इलेक्शन कमीशन खुद ही कंप्लिसिट है, उसके अंदर भी लेयर्स हैं। कितना सिग्निफिकेंट था या मोमेंट है ये पाकिस्तान के लिए? आप भी अपना स्टूडेंट हैं हिस्ट्री के, आप पब्लिक पॉलिसी के अंदर रिसर्च भी आपकी, आप सियासी कारकुन भी हैं, आपने इस पूरे मरहले के थ्रू आप गुजरे हैं। कितना सिग्निफिकेंट मोमेंट है आपके ख्याल में ये इस वक्त पाकिस्तान की तारीख में और के लिए?
So मेरी इस प्राय मैं इस पे बस दे भी चुका हूँ ट्विटर पे। My view is on the whole just the question of the how unprecedented all of this is. तो मेरे ख्याल में तो है, I think it's unprecedented both in terms of the bad and the good. एक तो ये कि यकीनन ज़ाहिर है पाकिस्तान की तारीख भर में इलेक्शन जो हैं मैनिपुलेट होते रहे हैं, मैनेज होते रहे हैं। पूरे 90s के अंदर भी, उससे पहले 80s में तो ऑब्वियसली शैम इलेक्शंस थे। 2002 में वी सॉ द मुशर्रफ इलेक्शन व्हिच वाज कंप्लीटली मैनेज्ड बाय फॉर अ किंग्स पार्टी PMLQ. And then 2018, I also was witness to that. I took part in that election. I do agree that I think PTI did have a mandate in 2018, but it was inflated by mostly a lot of it by pre-polling, and then what happened with the RTS on
बहुत
some
सारी
seats.
चीजें थी, बहुत सारी चीज, दबाव
Simple.
भी डाला जा रहा था एक तरफ PMLN
Yeah,
के ऊपर, इतना नहीं जितना म्यूटेट हुआ बाद में,
oh,
मगर
yeah.
गो ऑन।
Yeah, I mean, their leadership was targeted, and obviously some of them were jailed, and some of them were Nawaz Sharif was taken out of contention. So all of that absolutely happened. But this election is like qualitatively different. I think इसके अंदर हमने देखा है this attempt to completely dismantle a political organization altogether. Leadership तो चलें जेल में उनकी भी गई, but like thousands of workers of PTI were arrested. Obviously, and then 2 new parties were carved out of PTI months before the election. Like, you know, you're seeing like this engineering
इस्तेकाम
happening on a
पाकिस्तान
scale.
पार्टी और PTI
Yeah,
खटक
yeah,
परवेज।
PTI, absolutely. And then like and yeah, and then obviously like the scale of the repression we've seen, I think possibly the जो खवातीन जो उनके साथ जो हुआ है, जो तैयबा राजा, सनम जावेद, आलिया हमजा,
यास्मीन
यास्मीन
राशिद
राशिद, I think these are possibly
और अनगिनत और खवातीन।
the longest serving female political prisoners, I think, in Pakistani history. And
अच्छा,
I mean, yeah,
अच्छा।
from my knowledge, I mean, I'm okay if someone corrects me on this. I know there have been female political prisoners before.
सबसे ज्यादा यानी खवातीन जो जेल में रही हैं, ज्यादा अरसा गुजारा है, ये अब हो गई हैं। मैं समझ रहा बेनजीर भुट्टो होगी शायद, या
Benazir was obviously placed. Yes, I think Benazir is the one. But again, I mean, the qualitative difference is
मगर
again
मुमकिन हो
Benazir
सकता
was
है, मुमकिन हो सकता है, सही कह रहे हैं आप,
she was the
मुमकिन हो
prime
सकता
minister.
है। गो ऑन।
She was the prime minister, similar to other political leaders who have been put in jail. But right now, these were like many of these were political workers of the party. They were not the leadership. So I think the crackdown on the entire party and the attempt to just dismantle it. Obviously, then the taking away of the symbol. There were like enforced disappearances that happened with many of their candidates. Things that only used to happen in the peripheries, Balochistan, mein, in Fata, in Sindh. They started happening in Punjab also, and I mean, I think those sorts of things did not really occur PMLN के साथ खासकर 2018 में.
हाँ यार, ये
And
तो नहीं
again,
हुआ ना कि लोग अपना गायब हो जाते थे और फिर स्टूडियो के अंदर आके या घरों में आके इंटरव्यू दे रहे हैं लाइव।
yeah, absolutely, and yeah,
उसमें
all
आपके
those interviews that
प्रोग्रेसिव
took place
लेफ्ट
on
के
the
लोग भी मौजूद थे उसके अंदर आपके, बाय द वे। उसके अंदर
Yeah, I
आपके
think
प्रोग्रेसिव
absolutely
लेफ्ट के,
a lot of
अवाउडली
liberals, yeah, a lot
एटलीस्ट।
of journalists who consider themselves progressive absolutely took part in that. I completely agree. And then there was the abduction of family members. मैं बहुत सारे नौजवानों को जानता हूँ who even approached me for help in raising that because like they're like लोगों के मामू and mothers, and like it was just like on in terms of at least what has been done with mainstream political parties in Pakistan. This I feel like this was quite intense. And then obviously the cases. I mean, and against obviously Imran Khan and others also, but you could argue some like whatever some of these cases had merit or not, but the way that they were conducted in jail, with not even allowing him to come to court, and then that Iddat case in particular, I think that was really one of the straws that broke the camel's back. Like I have never witnessed in Pakistan a former prime minister's marriage getting annulled days before an election and on the basis of the testimony of the former husband. I mean, I think that was a particular low that I've never seen. And then obviously there's many things you can point out. So I do think that there were greater orders of magnitude to the repression, that occurred before this election compared to past ones, even though obviously there have been many brutalities that have taken place in the past. And then I think what was also unprecedented for me was obviously the actual result of the election itself, in the sense of, as far as I've been witnessing elections in my lifetime from 2002 onwards, but really I only started observing elections from 2008 onwards, I have not seen जो party जिसके पीछे वो जो एक there's this term in Pakistan called hawa, which essentially means कि जिसके पीछे the push of the powers that be होती है, that the parties that is expected to win. I have not seen in the election cycles that I've observed कि जो इस पार्टी के पीछे हवा नहीं थी, बल्कि उल्टा उस पार्टी को लोग literally कह रहे थे कि there's no way they'll be allowed to come into power. That party has actually emerged as the single largest party. I think
हाँ,
it may
2018 में हवा पीटीआई के पीछे थी, तो
PTI के साथ
नवाज शरीफ दब गया, यानी वो नहीं जीत सके। मगर इस
बिल्कुल।
बार हवा दूसरी तरफ थी, तो आप सही कह रहे हैं, बिल्कुल, गो ऑन।
Yeah, same in 2013 हवा उस वक्त नवाज शरीफ के पीछे थी। 2008 में obviously after BB's assassination there was also a sympathy vote, and Musharraf's
Party.
time was ending and people were expecting the People's Party and PMLN in coalition would form something. 2002 में obviously was the King's Party that came into power, the PMLQ, and obviously throughout the 90s it was whatever party was, like taken out.
In favor, जिसको
I
बाहर
suppose
push किया था वो।
Yeah. So, I mean, in all these elections, maybe you could argue for 1988 when Benazir swept into power after Zia's dictatorship. But even then,
उस वक्त मर चुका था ना।
Absolutely, yes. Zia had been assassinated, so people were expecting.
फिर भी उनके पीपल्स पार्टी के पीछे थी।
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, it's really, at least in my lifetime, I have not seen this particular instance occur, and I haven't seen other analysts spoke. I mean, maybe people have spoken about this, but I'd like to see what the data says specifically on the ground in terms of where electables lost compared to say party workers or like relatively obscure or first-time candidates. So I'm trying to look for that data, and I want to make an actual estimation.
अच्छा, कि हमारे पास कुछ भी डेटा आया है कि अपना मेरी कल बात हो रही थी आयशा सिद्दीका से, वो कह रही थी 48% टर्न आउट। तो मैंने उनसे पूछा नहीं, मैं मैसेज भी नहीं किया उसके बाद, मगर कि 48% टर्न आउट किस तरीके से हम कह सकते हैं, यानी अभी तो ये फिगर्स आई नहीं ना, कोई चीज फाइनलाइज ही नहीं है ना कि कितने लोग निकले, कितनों ने वोट डाला, फर्स्ट टाइम वोटर्स कितने थे।
I would not trust these numbers really, like definitively. I'm sure maybe it's a ballpark figure, but obviously until we get the accurate election results for all the seats that are being contested, I think after that is when we should make the determination of what turnout it was. And because it's very obvious that there has been some massive tampering with the final outcomes. And I think, so that should be, before we make any pronouncements about, okay, क्या इलेक्शंस के क्या टर्नआउट व्हाट व्हाट्स
अच्छा, वो कह रहे हैं कि जी 48% बेस्ड ऑन अजहर अली कमरानी कह रहे हैं, ऐड किया, और एक और सवाल भी उन्होंने पूछा, वो भी आपसे पूछे, कह रहे हैं 48% बेस्ड ऑन फॉर्म 47। 48% बेस्ड ऑन फॉर्म 47। अच्छा, उसके बाद ये आपसे कह रहे हैं कि
फॉर्म 40, ECP की जो फॉर्म 47 है वो दैट्स द बेसिस, एंड आई डोंट थिंक वी कैन ट्रस्ट दैट राइट नाउ फ्रैंकली।
वो मसला ही उसी पे आगे पड़ा हुआ है। मसला ही फॉर्म 47 के ऊपर पड़ा हुआ है।
बिल्कुल, I think so. Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about that, we can get to those actual questions.
मगर ये एक सवाल अजहर अली कमरानी का सवाल है, इसको रात से निकाल दे, तो मदद भी की। थैंक यू सो मच अजहर। ये कहते हैं, अमार, do you think that this election or the coming assembly will be able to complete its term this time? Number one. Number two, because some people feel that the country may have another general election after 1 or 2 years at the most.
Yeah, it depends on really what decision ultimately made. अगर जो अभी जो इम्कान जो लग रहे हैं कि PMLN and People's Party कोई voting arrangement कर लें, it doesn't even sound like a coalition. Apparently, I heard Bilawal say that they will vote for PMLN's candidate for Prime Minister, but they won't participate in the cabinet, and they'll support the government on an issue-by-issue basis. And then you're hearing reports that even the PMLN doesn't want its own prime ministerial candidate, and they're asking the People's Party to take it up. But at the same time, they do want to form government of some kind. So, like, at least from what we can tell right now, this does not look like the beginnings of a stable coalition government whatsoever. It looks like the instability that we saw before the election is going to continue if this is what actually ends up happening. Yeah, so but there could be other options. I mean, we can talk about that, but I do, of course, I feel like I agree with the PTI stance that like the establishing the correct election result should be the priority for
प्रायोरिटी,
now.
ये यानी
Making
इक्वेशंस और
sure,
ऑपोजिशन और ये दिस इज सेकेंडरी ऑलमोस्ट, आपके ख्याल से अभी भी सेकेंडरी है? क्योंकि अब देखे ना, 13 फरवरी हो गई है, 5 दिन गुजर गए हैं उस एक्सरसाइज से,
Mhm.
और उसके इन 5 दिन एक्चुअली लगते हैं कि 5 महीने गुजर गए हैं, इतना यानी ओवरलोड
Yeah.
हो चुका है लोगों के ऊपर,
Mhm.
धांधली ये वो, यानी इतनी, इस कंफ्यूजन में आपके ख्याल से इट्स ऑलरेडी टू लेट कि जो पावर्स दैट बी, और आपने इनिशियली स्पेस की बात की थी कि जब भी ये जबर में इंक्रीज हुआ तो वो मुखालिफ तरफ को, यानी जो कुव्वतें हैं ताकत की, आमरीत की, उनको स्पेस मिली, तो अभी भी
Mhm.
आपके ख्याल से स्पेस उनको लगता है कि इतनी इतनी इतना सब कुछ करने के बावजूद भी अगर वो लोग वहां पे हैं तो स्पेस ही स्पेस है, फिर तो कुछ बदला ही नहीं, यानी
Yeah, I
इतना
mean
कुछ बदलने के बावजूद भी।
that's essentially what will be happening, right? Again, if they do enter into this kind of coalition, that's essentially the perfect situation for the people behind the scenes, जो establishment है, कि वो मामलात चलाते रहेंगे. And I mean, it's in some ways that is the outcome they likely desired for hung parliament and a weak sort of coalition that can be the face. And while the SIFC and other people, like other institutions, go about their business of running the country, I mean, they're already in charge of most departments, etc. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, if this is the
So what does
coalition
that
that's
mean?
cobbled
What does that
together,
mean? What does that mean? They're already in charge of most departments. They're already running the country. As an individual, as a Pakistani, इसके क्या मायने हैं आप जो कह रहे
I
हैं?
mean, it's Khamenei that we have essentially this unconstitutional sort of regime that's sort of ruling over us. That's not really following, staying under its constitutional ambit. That's essentially doing what it's always done, to engineer political outcomes to protect its own institutional and commercial interests. Yeah, and we're going to see more of the same. But I think, yeah, that's why this is something of an opportunity that we are in right now, where for once the political outcomes that the deep state tries to always engineer in the ballot box have not succeeded, and people have actually come and voted in large numbers against the outcomes that they were trying to engineer. And so I don't think these opportunities arise every day, every year, or even every election cycle. I think this is a time for clawing back whatever political space and space for civil rights and human rights and, like, pro-democratic reform that we can get. So that's why I sympathize with the PDI's view that absolutely we should be focused on getting the correct results and the seats overturned. And I've seen a lot of the forms they've uploaded so far, and I haven't seen all of them, though. I'm not going to make a claim because there's lots of
क्या
numbers
मतलब, अब
going in.
फॉर्म 45 आपने देखे जो अपलोड किए हैं, क्या क्या उससे एक पिक्चर आ रही है सामने मार?
Yeah, so I've seen on the PDI drive that they've shared right now. There's about 39 NA constituencies, about 9 Sindh constituencies, 3 KP constituencies, and 2 Punjab constituencies. By that I mean KP Assembly, Punjab Assembly, and Sindh Assembly, and 39 NA constituencies. I've been through about 10 of them so far, mostly the ones for Islamabad, some for Pindi, and some for Karachi. And the trend absolutely checks out so far. Like most of these seats, like for instance in Islamabad, the Islamabad essentially was swept by the PTI from what I've seen in the Form 45s. And NA 47, the Shoaib Shaheen, the PTI independent candidate, was essentially leading in about 92% of all polling stations whose results that I saw, the scanned forms that are there. And Tariq Azhar Chaudhry was leading in about 8% of them. And then he was declared the winner by like 16,000 votes, when in actuality, Shoaib Shaheen has a massive lead of tens of thousands of votes, if you tally it. Similarly, for NA 48 and NA 46, the other constituencies of Islamabad, there are massive leads, landslide victories that have been converted into defeats. There's also like NA 55 for Rawalpindi. I've looked at went through all forms for that. The PTI candidate Raja Visharat was leading in something like 90%, 85 to 90% of polling stations, and very large leads also. Like the pattern is very clear that in many of these constituencies, at least, and so here we're talking about Islamabad and North Punjab, there's absolutely the results that have been announced do not correspond with the Form 45 evidence that is available. Now, I also have to point out that there are some forms in there that don't have signatures. I haven't used those in my calculations. They're a minority. And there are some forms for which all the polling stations are not available. So, I mean, so there's still like some data things that need to be reconfirmed, but there's an overall trend that that is definitely emerging, that Islamabad 100%, many seats in Rawalpindi for sure, and the Karachi seats, their numbers are also incredible, where MQM has been granted all of these seats in which they have something like 2,000 votes, 3,000 votes, 1,000 votes, and the PTI candidate usually has 25, 30, 40. It's quite like it's very brazen, honestly. What I will say though, also, I mean, and PDF, so like the social media team, I guess I'm going to ask them about this also. That there are not a lot of there's not a lot of data uploaded yet for Punjab. There's only two constituencies which I've seen Form 45s for. And from what I've heard about, like, so thus far, like 5 or 6 PTI candidates from Punjab are actually contesting the results in the election tribunals. So I can't say, and currently I feel, from what I last checked, I think the PMLN has like a 21 seat lead in Punjab. So I'm not sure, like maybe it's a question of the data still not being ready, or I'm not sure why it's not there. But I'm not sure if with the PTI's claims about also being able to form a government in Punjab, like I haven't seen the data for that yet. That's like that much. But I have seen some very clear data for NA seats in North Punjab, Islamabad, Karachi. I've seen what we've looked at maybe 10, 11 seats so far. And yeah, those are absolutely, most of these are landslide victories for the PTI that have been converted
यार
into
ये बता
defeats.
मुझे मार, या ये बता कि was this by design? Was this the idea, or was this the incompetence? ये किस तरीके से ये, चलो सही, अगर आप एक ही हवा दे रहे हैं आप किसी को, या किसी के पीछे आप जोर डाल रहे हैं, तो वो तो इमर्ज होना चाहिए ना. एक शॉकिंग है ना ये आपने, यानी आपके ख्याल से क्या था, ये डिजाइन था कि इसी तरीके से इनको दिखाओ, या?
No, I mean, in the case of Pakistan and the Pakistani government, I generally go by the dictum that never attribute to malevolence what you can attribute to incompetence. And I don't think, I mean, I've met some people who have spoken of like, okay, this is like the establishment playing like this 5D chess where they're trying to like also bring Imran into power and to cut Nawaz down to size. And I mean, from what I've experienced of the Pakistani state and government, I don't think they're that competent that they'll also be trying to rig seats against Imran. But what I sense is from what has happened is they were not expecting such a massive vote for the PTI, and I think as the results started coming in, I think they sort of panicked, especially because some major bigwigs that were expecting to be part of the dispensation were losing, such as people like On Chaudhry against Salman Akram Raja, obviously Nawaz Sharif against Yasmin Rashid, and many other PMLN stalwarts, and also people in the MQM that they clearly had some kind of an understanding with. So I think they intervened there, but they rushed there in a hurry, but it was already too late because a lot of polling agents had already received their Form 45s by then. So the only change they could do was to the Form 47s. But there's another there was another part to this, but I don't remember what I had to say. But I think essentially, if you ask me, I think a lot of it is incompetence. The other part was, yes, what I do think they have also possibly done, which is less 5D chess and more just the sorts of things they do, is that some of the PTI independents, I do believe, and you can already see some of them have already begun to speak with the PMLN and to form part of their government. I do think some of those, from the reports that I've heard, have been compromised also. There are probably some candidates within maybe Punjab, maybe also in KP, that I believe have been accounted for, and with the understanding that they would help to break away and help the PDM 2.0 come into power when needed. So I do think that there is that as well, that maybe not all of these folks are necessarily going to act in PTI's interests.
All right, so just a bit of a segue here to what you're saying. Comments के अंदर Bilal Naveed Khan, IK has marked out his political rivals clearly, PMLN, PPP and MQM. I guess now they'll have to join together again for their own survival. And this government will be short-lived anyways, because PTI will perhaps one by one or in chunks take back the seats it's been deprived of, leading to slipping majority of this Murabba government. These are the comments, these are the ideas, of course, that people who have been following it, either supporters or not, everyone has a take, right? हमने ऐसी चीज नहीं देखी, ये जो इन्होंने एक फ्रैंकेनस्टाइन बनाने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, इसकी क्या लॉन्जेविटी होगी, क्या इफेक्टिवनेस होगी ऐसे क्रिटिकल टाइम पे पाकिस्तान की माशी सूरत हाल के लिए। मैं थोड़ा सा रुख, क्योंकि हम ये बात हर कोई बात कर रहा है, ये भी चीज एक न्यू है ना कि आपको 2018 के अंदर उठा के लेके चले गए अमार, और वो कहते हैं कि जी आप सेडिशन आपने किया है या बहुत बोलते हैं, आप सुधर जाएं, ये वो आप अभी भी बोल रहे हैं, तो आपको डर नहीं लगता अमार? क्योंकि मुझसे लोग पूछते हैं यार अली आपको डर नहीं लगता यार, मैं तो खैर बाहर रहता हूँ ज्यादातर, तो और मेरा फोकस अभी हाल ही में शुरू हुआ, आपको डर नहीं लगता अमार अब इस सिचुएशन में, सूरत हाल में?
नहीं, डर तो बिल्कुल लगता है frankly, not for myself but for my family also. I've experienced what it's like before, and it's not fun. I mean, I don't disagree with everything I did just with landed me in that situation, but it's obviously hard on your families, and as many people have now, so many people have found out over the last 18 months or so. So yeah, but I mean, I honestly don't think कि मैं जो बातें कर रहा हूँ, I'm like saying anything particularly seditious again or particularly pro-terrorism. I'm just really looking at the data and saying what I'm finding there, and like I'm just saying that we should act according to the constitution. And I'm not even a member of PTI. I don't know anyone in their leadership. This is not about PTI for me personally. This is about the same political project that I've been working on my entire life, which is to establish a pro-people's, pro-democratic system here, where people can actually have representation, and then they can actually have their needs met, and we can actually create like a robust, productive, and equal society. So yeah, and I think so for that you need to establish some basic rules of the game, and yeah, and also since the election, I feel a bit less fear. Frankly, I think a lot of people do, and I think that's also why this vote was very important, because a lot of people know that the things that they believe in, that the things that they're saying, they're not alone in this now. A lot of people also agree with these same ideals. Yeah, there's a lot of people who want to see a real functioning democracy in this country. And we always used to say that Pakistan is not ready for democracy, it's not ready for Jamhuriyat. People aren't interested in that here. People just will go with whoever the establishment or the ruling party
तो
tells
ये
them.
तो एटीट्यूड आप जो अपने लेफ्ट प्रोग्रेसिव्स कुछ हैं आप में से, उनका भी यही एटीट्यूड है ना, यानी हम औरत मार्च का एग्जांपल लिया जाता है, कुछ और प्रोग्रेसिव्स जो बातें हर, यानी इमरान खान के दौर में, आई गेस वी गोइंग अराउंड इन सर्कल्स, बट एक यूटोपियन आइडिया अपने जहन में एक होता है। पाकिस्तानी सोसाइटी के अंदर बिगेटरी भी है, मिसोजिनी भी है, वियर्ड डॉगमास भी मौजूद हैं, एक हॉचपॉच है, अनएजुकेशन है, मगर एक बहुत बड़ी रेवोल्यूशन भी आ गई है हमार, एक बहुत बड़ी यानी एजुकेशन भी आ गई है मेरे हाथ में, फॉर एग्जांपल
Yeah,
टिकटॉक।
absolutely not. Yeah, I completely
मैं बाहर
agree.
एक रेडी वाले से मिला, उसके पास एक स्मार्टफोन था, उसने 5-6 हजार रुपए का लिया था, उसके पास टिकटॉक था यार। 1500 टिकटॉकर अपेरेंटली अभी भी जेल के अंदर है, जो हिमायती इमरान खान साहब के।
Absolutely.
तो यानी the reality has moved. It's not,
Yeah, no,
you can't apply 1980s 90s ideas in 2024. ये population, ये लोग बहुत आगे जा चुके हैं।
yeah, absolutely. Like social media has completely changed the game. I think the fact that you can't control, I mean, they still try, बंद कर देते हैं हर आज 2 दिन बाद आजकल तो, लेकिन yeah, I think because you can't control information through the media anymore, which has always been manipulated behind the scenes. Discourse is always controlled about what you can or can't say. I mean, people like us, we've been like banned from speaking on the media for years now because of the things that we talk about. But social media has obviously now really like expanded the public sphere, expanded the space for debate. And I think it's just much harder to control. And as younger generations keep growing up, these are young people who have literally grown up with these technological tools available since they were born. It's just going to get increasingly harder. And I think the writing is on the wall, really. And then there's also, yeah, the question of like these parties, the traditional parties, are not really cognizant of this anymore, it seems. I think, for instance, for the PMLN, there should be some reflection right now about the fact that like they're still attempting the same ways of doing politics as in the 1980s. There's this, and dynastism is a complicated question, and personally, I think that it's also obviously very deeply linked to military intervention in this country. That when you keep deposing leaders before their time, and then and then people keep going back to them, it doesn't allow new leadership to emerge. But at the same time, these parties have shot themselves in the foot with their dynastism also. I mean, look at जो PMLN के जो some of their top tier leadership, शाहिद खाकान अब्बासी जैसे लोग, मिफ्ता इस्माइल जैसे लोग, अभी जुबैर उमर जैसे लोग, जो कि पार्टी छोड़ चुके हैं क्योंकि उन्हें
डायनेस्टी उसमें तो नहीं चल रही ना, डायनेस्टी तो जुडिशरी में भी चल रही है, जुडिशियल डायनेस्टीज भी तो क्रिएट हुई है ना। और इसके ऊपर एक और इंटरेस्टिंग सवाल, ये जो जुडिशियल इन्वॉल्वमेंट थी इलेक्टोरल प्रोसेस के अंदर, यही बहुत एक इंटरेस्टिंग, यानी हमेशा आप कह सकते हैं क्योंकि आपने सफर भी किया रही है, मगर इतनी गहरी बल्ला छीनना ये बहुत ही एक इम्पोर्टेंट एलिमेंट है इसके अंदर भी हमारा।
मेरे लिए पिछले साल एक के अंदर जो वन ऑफ द मेन थिंग्स आई हैव बीन टॉकिंग अबाउट, जो कि व्हिच इज वर्स राइट नाउ, इज के जुडिशरी का किस हद तक जो कॉम्प्रोमाइज हुई है। आई रिमेंबर लाइक फॉर इंस्टेंस इवन माय ओन केस, जब हमारे को सिलेक्शन के इल्ज़ामात लगे थे, तो उस वक्त हम हाई कोर्ट में गए, एंड देन इवेंचुअली आफ्टर फ्यू डेज वी वर Atharvananda got his release, and we basically said that ये charges गलत हैं, and obviously these people haven't done anything to deserve these charges, and we were released, and then we were able to fight the charges in court and get them out. पिछले साल में हमने देखा है आपको bails भी मिल जाएं, आपको judiciary high courts भी order कर दें, those orders are completely ignored, and the judges have not really done anything to enforce those orders, or have not been able to do anything. And then obviously there are some judges who have completely and utterly let go of the letter of the law, and they've just literally been going on whims to completely favor some parties over others. And again, this is something that's always happened. But I think the crucial difference is that PTI has managed to somehow put up a very concerted act of resistance on a very popular level. And they have managed to actually outwit them in some ways. And I think, that's a very crucial part of it. Obviously, people always talk about Imran Khan. PTI is just like being centered around Imran Khan. It's just a cult or whatever around him. And I think all the time he's been in jail. And especially after like the departure of a large part of its leadership, the electable leadership, the IPPs and the PTI KPs and many others who left.
Electable leadership. That doesn't even
the unelectables. Yes, I think that's what they should call now. So since then, I think that's actually given PTI a chance to actually get new people into its leadership ranks and organize the party a bit better at the grassroots level. And I think, and this is, I think, a question that really has to be talked about right now. Because they are both things. I mean, there are some people who will say, look, PTI is completely different from PMLN and People's Party, and this is just a completely the party of the people, party of the youth, and all that. And then there are other people who say, look, they're exactly the same. Many people on the liberal left say this, they're exactly the same as the other parties. And obviously, you see the things like the Gandapur selection, and that becomes a reason for people to talk about, because he's also a dynast, he's also an electable. His father was a minister with Musharraf.
मगर वो हथौड़ा भी है, यानी इसका मतलब कि वो बैक डाउन करने के लिए तैयार नहीं है। वो ये सिग्नलिंग भी है ना, क्योंकि आई गेस उनके माइंडसेट में जाने के लिए वो कहते हैं कि अपना जीएम इज सेइंग पीटीआई इज नॉट अ कल्ट, वी हैव अ यूनिफाइंग फैक्टर, बट वी आर नॉट अ हाइव माइंड, इट्स अ मिडिल क्लास पार्टी, वी स्पेंड आवर टाइम मनी फॉर द पॉलिटिकल कॉज। बट going back to the Gandapur idea, go on.
Yeah, so what I was saying was that, look, so for me, this question of whether it's the same or whether it's very, very different, I think the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I think it's clear that obviously there are still some people in the PTI, those at the helm, obviously, the established traditional politicians of their constituencies, for whom I don't think who are particularly reform-minded or etc. And I mean, so they're still there, and I don't put them in a very different category from the electables in the PMLN or People's Party. But at the same time, I also feel like it is nonetheless true from what I've seen, though I want to look at more granular constituency level data. But it's clear that there is a new class of leadership that has emerged in PTI, and you can't just simply say that, nahin, this is exactly the same as... I mean, the PTI, for instance, what I'm trying to say is that the PTI that has been elected in the PTI candidates that have been elected, or the party that's been elected in 2024, is not the same party that was elected in July 2018, nor even is it the same party that was deposed in April 22. The experience that has gone through, the repression that has gone through, और उसकी वजह से जो leadership vacuum जो create हुआ, तो उसके अंदर new people have emerged. I mean, many of these are middle class people. There's lawyers, people like Taimur Malik, who's contesting in Multan. Obviously, people like Salman Akram Raja. I know candidates who have like come up through the Insaf Youth Wing. I particularly want to mention this PTI Balochistan candidate who I've been following, called Saddam Tareen, I believe his name is.
Tareen, yeah.
Who apparently beat Shazain Bukti according to the Form 45 count in Balochistan, but he's being denied. And he's like apparently a working class, very young leader. And I've heard him speak. He's yeah. I mean, I hope he stays protected and he stays safe. But yeah, so I don't think it's fair, even if we continue to have our critiques of the PTI. I've criticized the Gandapur decision today. I mean, for whatever reason, I understand the arguments for it. I also understand the arguments against it, but I can't bring myself.
आप अपना opinion कर सकते हैं.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
My main thing is PDI folks might have a different view on him. I personally don't think someone as embedded and entrenched can really change his colors completely, and I feel like I don't personally trust him to make the right.
वो सही है ना, hard men for hard times वाला हिसाब है.
Yeah. I get the situation that they're in and why it would be question, but nonetheless, I mean, I think there are questions that you can raise about this, and people should have the right to raise that and continue to raise that even after they take power in KP. But at the same time, I don't think that we can just continue to with this idea that it's exactly the same political formation that it's always been. Of course not. Like, it's certain things have changed. Like, it's a different party now, and I want to look more closely at the data before I make any pronouncements on exactly how much it's changed, like what percentage. I've seen some data that, like, for instance, like 52% of PTI's candidates this time were like first-time contestants for national and provincial assemblies, which is in itself remarkable. At the same time, I don't think, for instance, being a first-time contestant as a member of an existing dynastic family is the same thing as, say, someone like Saddam Tareen standing for the first time. So I want to really look at that data in terms of before I make a pronouncement. But what I can say now, that obviously there has been a shift in the composition of the party at some levels, at various leadership levels. A new class of leadership has emerged. You're seeing people, for instance, like people like Sher Afzal Marwat, for instance, and like these kinds of people were not really the face of the PTI up until a few months ago. Again, he's also a lawyer.
ये पर्ज ने शब्दों ने ऐसे ग्रास रूट्स तक, यानी इसकी जड़ें ग्रास रूट्स तक फेंकी हैं.
Absolutely, it's created a new class of leadership, I think. And I noticed also, I think one thing PTI did that was very smart when it was facing that repression is that it worked a lot with the legal community, with lawyers, because obviously it was also need of the time given all the cases they were facing. And I think that's also led to a new class of like lawyers, leadership from within the bars that's joined PTI. Which makes sense in Pakistan's case. Obviously, it's happened in the past also, but in any kind of battles for democracy and anti-establishment, lawyers tend to be at the forefront. So I think that may also change the character of the party a bit. So yeah, I mean, yeah. So this is what I can see from the data. I just think all I'm saying right now is, especially if there's people from my side of the political aisle listening to this, I'm not saying the PTI is some kind of revolutionary, radical sort of force all of a sudden. I mean, there's still a lot of people from within the status quo still there, but let's stop kidding ourselves that it's exactly the same thing. It's exactly the same party of electables around Imran Khan, essentially, or cult, or whatever you used to call it, that it was. So things have changed, and we need to upgrade our analytical frames to assess these changes.
That's a brilliant segue point. हमने 54 minutes ले लिए हैं, बड़े comments, बड़ी engagement आई है इसके ऊपर तैयार. अमार, आपके सेशन से, और एक और सवाल भी है आपके लिए, मगर मेरे ख्याल से ये तो यानी given है कि sudden exercise of delimitation of the constituencies because candidates did not know their electoral areas until last stage of the election. Election Commission issued a notification to change the extent of the constituency of Khyber district of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa 7 days before the election, for example. So if you want to comment on that, go ahead. If you don't, I'm okay with that as well. The Election Commission issued a notification to change the extent of the constituency of Khyber district of Khyber
Right.
Pakhtunkhwa 7 days before the election day.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of pre-poll rigging that clearly happened, and yeah, I mean, it's in fact right now it's just that what's happened after the election has been so brazen that everyone's forgotten about even what happened was happening at the pre-poll level. So yeah, I mean, clearly, like I said before, many things that happened in the build-up were, I would say, definitely unprecedented in terms of what has happened to political parties in Pakistani history.
Well, it's been an amazing session. Thank you so much, Ammar. और मेरे ख्याल से हम ये conversation जारी रखेंगे. जैसे दिन गुजरते हैं, आपको हम दोबारा तंग
Could I
करेंगे
just
कि
say
आप
something
आएं
before
और
we
go
Could I
ahead,
just say
please,
something
please.
before we end? Just because I mean, I imagine there might be PDF folks listening to this. I just think it's very important right now. Like, I agree that the priority should be on counting the votes and making sure that the results actually reflect the public mandate, and they should fight tooth and nail for everything, for everything for every seat that they were victorious in. At the same time,
So
I
no
think we also
compromise. So no compromise is what you're saying.
Yes, but I'm not. But I do think, however, that even if a lot of this does happen and they manage to successfully overturn many of these seats, I think you will still require some degree of coalition building, and I think to shut oneself off from that entirely, there is a certain interest that is the party's interest. I understand that you don't want to work with any of these parties that you have campaigned against for so long, and I get that it's a question of identity also, but at the same time there is a national interest also. There is something that the country needs, which is some degree of stability, so we can make the necessary steps for reform that we need, and that is at the economic level. I mean, we have like $24 billion of debt repayments due in June. We will likely have to enter into another IMF program. Our tax revenues are in a terrible state. Stock market is crashing. It's not in this country's interest for an unstable coalition of parties that lost to be in power. The PTI, I agree, should 100% be part of the national government. But from what the number is, at least that I've seen, even if many of these seats are overturned, thus far the evidence that I've seen does not make me think that they will still reach a simple majority on their own. I do think some coalition building will eventually be needed. So even as you fight for those seats, I'm not saying that just accept these results and just enter into coalition with anybody, but do fight for those results. I do think it's important that the results reflect the people's votes. At the same time, please don't adopt like this maximalist stance that we won't work with anyone at all. I think, for instance, people are talking about these days, like some people and PDM supporters, about the new Charter of Democracy, for instance, and some kind of the whole healing touch thing. Now, I obviously don't agree with what they're trying to talk about. I agree with Chairman Gohar Khan that healing, release political prisoners first, count the actual election results, and report them accurately, and then we can talk about healing touch. I get that logic. I think that's fair. But at the same time, we need to try and take a broader view of things. If these results are overturned and if they do accept your mandate, then be open to working with some. For instance, I feel like the only legitimate coalition, if it was to function, would be a PTI People's Party one. Because they do have a mandate in Sindh, whether one denies it or not. I mean, whether one likes it or not, it's a real mandate. It would have a very significant majority, and then you can have a basis for an agreement on actual sort of democratic, institutional, economic reform in this country. If you enter into this coalition, enter into it not on the basis of just distributing posts amongst yourselves, but talk about, okay, now that we've achieved some kind of democratic consensus in this country, now we need to all work towards things like
हाँ, मगर अभी
effective
वो डेमोक्रेटिक कंसेंसस वो दूसरी तरफ से
वो
काउंटर
पहुंचा नहीं है।
आर्गुमेंट होगा
यस।
इनका कि
हाँ,
भाई अपना आप एमक्यूएम के साथ किस तरीके से बैठ सकते हैं। फॉर एग्जांपल पीटीआई कहेगा वो तो
यानी
डाका तो
एमक्यूएम
पीटीआई का ही पड़ा है ना उसके ऊपर, या
नहीं
पीएमएलएन के साथ आप
एमक्यूएम
एडजस्टमेंट गॉन
PMLN, I don't think it
गॉन
makes. I don't think it makes sense for PMLN to be in power at the federal level at all. They have not been voted into power at the federal level. All the seats I've seen, this is just would be complete subversion of the public will. MQM also, I think they've been handed a lot of seats there, and I think those should obviously be contested and overturned. That's on the principle of the thing. I completely agree. Now, how long it takes, that's not in any of our control. Though we should be pushing for this not needing much time at all. So I completely agree with that. The only, I think, the only legitimate coalition that I can see would be of PTI and People's Party, maybe if there's other parties that might also want to join, but actually make it, and then I feel like if they do accept your mandate, they accept that you the overturning of the seats, and accept waiting until that time to make the prime minister. But if they do accept your mandate, then I think have a broader view of things in the sense of like what all these governments will need to be doing in terms of like instituting like actual, like say, local governments. If PTI, for instance, wants to over time make inroads into Sindh, they need institutions like local government, effective local government in Sindh, that to be working towards. Also things like student unions, also things like like having some basic understandings on the kind of economic steps we need. And again, all of this needs to happen after the election results are actually the real election results. And I completely agree with that. But beyond that, I think if you want a stable government in this country, they can actually take some steps towards economic and institutional reform and democratic strengthening, then I think you will have to drop it some of these maximalist stances of not cooperating with anyone. That's what I'm saying. Like, continue to fight for your seats. Don't stop that. But at the same time, have some pragmatism, and also not like just be like, oh, we'll sit in the opposition and then we'll topple the government a few months later. And then, I mean, I think, I think as soon as we can, there's a lot of crises this country is still mired in. And I do think that all parties most of my pressure online is on the PDM and PMLN for trying to cobble together a coalition that I don't think can work at all. But to PTI folks watching this, I would say just at least keep some openness to conversation, and eventually maybe working with some of the other parties as well. That's my view.
Parting shot, positive or negative after the elections? आप यानी उम्मीद रख रहे हैं कि आप कह रहे हैं मायूसी हो गई आपको जो आप सिचुएशन देख रहे हैं इस मुल्क में 8 फरवरी या उससे पहले भी अपना आप तो देखते आ रहे हैं ये सिचुएशन, एक्सपीरियंस करते आ रहे हैं आप यहाँ पे, तो आप उम्मीद रख रहे हैं, उम्मीदवार यानी उम्मीद है आप में कि आप कह रहे हैं मायूसी हो गई है यार, कोई उम्मीद नहीं है?
No, I mean, it's not like I think compared to before the election, definitely बहुत ज़्यादा उम्मीद है. I think right before the election and months before that, obviously, it seemed like this country is destined to keep repeating these cycles over and over again, and we going to continue to be in this situation where the state continues to subvert the public's will. Lekin now I do feel like things have changed, and this will not change overnight. I don't think like some revolution has happened every. I mean, people's everyday economic circumstances and everything are going to continue to be bad for a while. But I do think that there is a pathway to progress from here, and that it seems like political society has won, with obviously because of PTI, has won back some space from the establishment, and we need to make use of this opportunity, all political actors in this country. And I think many non-PTI folks have also very creditably, many candidates have accepted defeat, even given up seats in Karachi, say that they knew that PTI had won. So we need this.
Jamaat Islami.
Absolutely. So I think this is the moment when all political forces need to demonstrate some wisdom, need to demonstrate an openness to accepting each other's mandate and learning to like work together, agree on a concrete set of reforms, and have this conversation right now and not let go of this opportunity.
Excellent point to end the conversation on. 1 घंटा 3 मिनट से हम लगे हुए थे. Ammar Rashid, thank you so much, who's a public policy researcher, also political worker for AWP. इनको फॉलो भी करें आप एक्स ट्विटर के ऊपर. इस कंटेंट को लाइक, शेयर और रीट्वीट जरूर कीजिएगा. कमेंट्स बहुत आए, बहुत सारी एंगेजमेंट हुई और इंशाल्लाह आपसे दोबारा मुलाकात करेंगे. अल्लाह हाफिज.
Thank you so much, Eric. Great to speak to you.